I was reminded recently that sometimes what we need is just a good reintroduction. Just an introduction once again to something that we have known, to something that we have treasured, to something that we have read before, pondered before, talked about, and engaged. Sometimes it's good just to have a basic reintroduction. Because when you do, typically you remember the value and you see nuances and new aspects that you never saw in what you treasured before. It seems like almost like too ominous of an introduction, because actually the way that it came roaring back to me was pretty simple. My favorite book of all time is George MacDonald's Lilith. It's fiction, and I read it for the first time like 5 or 6 years ago, and I was just captivated, overwhelmed by the imagery, overcome with the theological nuances, and I was reminded as I was reading it that this was the author that shaped all the words and the images of C.S. Lewis and other great Christian minds. George MacDonald's Lilith. It had been a couple of years though, and not too long ago, I decided, I want to read my favorite book again. I don't typically reread books very often, but I'm like, if it's my favorite book, I don't know if I remember all of the turn of phrase or if I remember all the nuances of it that I loved so much the first time I read it. And I reread the book, and I fell in love with the incredible depth that it offered. Just a reintroduction, a reminder of what I had easily forgotten as time went on. A reintroduction so that I remembered what it was that I experienced the first time I engaged it. A reintroduction which allowed me to see nuances and treasures in the text that I had overlooked for so long because I just simply had not re-engaged it. That's what I'm calling to us to this week. I want us to experience a reintroduction to love. Listen, having long hair, I get a lot of comments about being a hippie, and usually with this concept or the comment of being a hippie comes this definition, this flowery recognition of love being something that matters. Now, to be honest with you, my friends are hippies. I'm not a hippie. I know them. And yet I understand what's happening. Because when you have long hair, stuff like that gets said. One of the things, though, that recently struck me was how often the definition of love is attached to movements like hippies or to even agendas inside of the church. And we actually think we know what love is. But I realized recently I needed a reintroduction. I needed to be introduced to it again. Why? Because a lot of the times, the way we treat and talk about love in the church today is almost when we're wanting to talk about something that is flowery, something that is weak. And you even have movements in the church talking about the need to regain the manliness of Christianity, the masculinity of Christianity, as if there is something innate in love which makes it less courageous or less powerful. And this past week, I was reading 1 Corinthians 13. I'd read this passage 1,000 times. And I read the passage and I put it down and just having gone through it once more. And it was until a couple of days later where it came back up in my mind again. And then the next day it ruminated once again. And this morning I picked it back up finally and I said, I think I need a good reintroduction. Because the way that Paul talks about love, the way that Paul treats the topic of love is far more exalted, far more powerful, far more exalting than how we typically speak, talk, and think about love in the church today. Listen to this. Paul says in chapter 13, verse 1, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, it doesn't matter. The church of Corinth is having this debate over whether or not it's okay in the church to be speaking in tongues and the tongues of angels and unintelligible tongue. Paul says, you know what? If I speak in tongues of men or tongues of angels, but I don't have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. It just doesn't matter. One of the things I realized this past week is whenever you stare love in the face, a lot of the things that we get super upset about, super passionate about, we realize don't matter half as much as what we thought it was in comparison to the grandeur of love. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, if I am so super smart, and if I have faith that can move mountains, that phrase jumped out at me. If I am so intelligent that I know all truth, and if I am so faithful that I can actually move mountains with my faith, but do not have love, Paul says in verse 2, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. What Paul's saying here is, if I know all the truth, if I have all the faith, and if I have all the deeds that usually are attached to love, but I don't truly know what love is, I have nothing. And then he starts to define love. You see, because love is patient. It is not easy to be patient in this world today that is constantly putting things at our fingertips and is encouraging us to demand the same of ourselves and of others. Love is, though, patient. It understands the wisdom of allowing things to unfold. Love is kind. It doesn't lash out against our enemies. It doesn't lash out against those that disagree with us. Love does not envy. It is content with what it has. It does not boast because it doesn't need to pretend to be something that it is not. It is not proud because it ultimately knows that what it is, that is the delight of our heart, is not to exalt ourselves, but to lay ourselves down for those that we love. It does not dishonor others. It doesn't need to. It doesn't need to put down others in order to exalt itself. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't keep a tally of all the things that have been done wrong to us in our stories, longing for God to reciprocate with his own judgment. No. Love has no delight in evil, even in the face of evil. But it does rejoice with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. The word always there is haunting to me, because at times I struggle to trust when things are difficult. I struggle keeping my hope whenever the nights get so long with the questions. I struggle to persevere in the face of things that are difficult. But love, verse 8, love never fails. Never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. But love never fails. Here's my goal for you this week. Why don't you get a new introduction to love? Be reintroduced. And hopefully in the reintroduction, you will be reminded of nuances long forgotten, of treasures that once invigorated your heart. And in the rediscovery of love, the reintroduction of love, hopefully you will remember that it is the key to upheave and to heal a broken world. I love you guys. Have a good week.